Okay, Vice Chair, and we are now live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. I'm Vice Chair Jackie Purcell, filling in today for Andrew Taylor. I would like to call the meeting to order at 4:03 p.m. Thank you. I would like to follow up with the reading of our land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki and ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Okay. I would like to do a roll call at this point, please. Elizabeth Duell. Do we have regrets from Elizabeth?
I've received no regrets from Elizabeth, but they do not seem to be in the call right now.
Okay, she may call later. Michelle Mahoney. Michelle may be on her way home from work. Nicole.
I'm here.
Kirsten Hemming. Okay. Rachel Manette.
Rochelle, I'm here.
Sorry, Rochelle, I know better too.
No worries.
Councillor Kathy Dago Gammon has given her regrets today. Councillor Trish Purdy.
I am here.
Hello, Councillor. Councillor Paul Russell.
And I'm here in wonderful Sackville.
Ah, wonderful. Jordan Weatherberry. Oh, I guess Jordan hasn't joined us. Okay, am I missing anybody? Okay, I'd like to look at number 2, approval of the minutes. Are there any changes the committee wishes to make with the minutes?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes of March 20 as presented.
I will second that. That's Rochelle.
Thank you, Rochelle. Question that the minutes of the March 20th meeting, Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting, be approved as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? It's passed. Number 3, approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Have there been any requests for additions, deletions, or changes to the order of business?
Vice Chair, there are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
Okay.
So I will move the order of business as presented.
You have a seconder?
This
Do
is
we have
Rochelle. I will also second that.
Thank you, Rochelle. The question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Passed. Business arising out of the minutes. Do we have any? I see Ms. Mahoney has joined us. Welcome.
Michelle, you're muted.
Okay. Next, for declaration of conflict of interest. Do we have any conflict of interest that members would like to declare?
Hi, Jackie. It's Michelle. Sorry I'm late.
That's fine. Thank you, Michelle. Glad you joined us. All right, we're at number 6 on the agenda, moving quickly today. Consideration of any deferred business. Do we have none? All right. Correspondence. Madam Clerk, do we have any correspondence received?
There was no correspondence received by the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you. Petitions? Have there been any petitions to be presented?
There were also no petitions presented to the clerk's office.
Thank you. Elizabeth, I think you've joined us. Are you able to see the interpreter?
This is the interpreter. She might just need a moment. There we
Fine.
go.
Thank you.
Yeah, Liz is just saying 1 second here.
Yes.
She's just saying who's speaking right now.
This is Jackie Elizabeth. I'm filling in for Andrew today as he wasn't able to make the meeting as chair.
Okay.
And as well, Elizabeth, I'm sorry, my video isn't working, so I'm not able to have my pretty face on screen today. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you.
Yeah, but
Okay.
also I'm sorry that I might.
That's fine. Glad you're able to join us, Elizabeth. Okay, information and items brought forward. We have none. Am I correct on that?
Yes, Chair, you are correct.
Thank you. Okay, staff report. Anything in terms of a staff report today?
We have a presentation from Maria Jacobs, 9.1.1 auditing active
Yes.
transportation facilities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Next on our agenda is a presentation and consultation from Public Works. I will ask Maria Jacobs, Active Transportation Planner, to give their presentation on the auditing active transportation facilities. Staff will be available to answer questions from committee members after the presentation. Okay, thank you. Maria?
Hi, everybody. It's funny because I thought we were going to meet. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I thought we were going to meet in person, and I was actually looking forward to it. But here we are, another Teams meeting. But okay, so I think this is the first time I've been to active advisory committee. And it's probably about not even quite a year that I've moved from planning and development department, and I've moved to Public Works. And I'm working with the active transportation team in Public Works. So what I wanted to do, it's very lengthy, and I know it was sent to you, the presentation, and I threw in a lot of information, but I put it out there so you have that there and you know kind of where we're coming from. Let me share my screen. Let's see if it works. Oh shoot, now I can't find it. Just a minute here. Oh, maybe it's here. Okay. Could people see that? No. Can anybody see what? No, nothing's on screen, right?
We can see the screen share of the Zoom, so you just need to show the presentation.
Wow, it was working just a minute ago, wasn't it? Other screen. I'm sorry, Can you see it now?
No.
Oh my God. Sorry about that. What's going on here? No? Okay.
And
Not-
and we
I'm
can
not
see
sure what's
Finnegan.
going on. I just practiced this, and now I was trying to think. I can't seem to think. See my on the examples that I have.
Maria, if you'd like, I can always screen share from my end and you can just let me know when you'd like me to advance to the next slide.
Yeah, that's not right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had it all here, and I just can't seem to get it going here. Okay.
Yeah, I can just get it up for us.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
Didn't we just practice this?
We did, but it's okay. It happens.
Okay. Okay. There we go. I added a few slides, but that's okay. I'm sure I can.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
We can see the presenter view of it, but not the presentation view of it.
Okay, we'll just have to switch things around. Sorry, just 1 second. Technical difficulty. Okay, can you see the presentation right now?
Yes, we
Yes.
can. You've got the
Okay.
right screen.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Emma. Okay, so yeah, I can't see it all, but that's okay. I see it's a live transcription on there, but or I guess I can just X that out. Is that okay? Okay. So basically, for the last several years, we've had we're growing or we're increasing our active transportation routes, and I'll get a little bit more detail what I mean by active transportation in a few minutes. And what I wanted to do, since we've been expanding quite a bit and we're making connections, there's always been bikeways and there's paths and multi-use paths. But now the main objective through the integrated mobility plan is to make these connections and to make it useful for everybody within HRM. So next slide. So what I want to do is just very high level go over some of the introductions I already did and the policy overview, and then touch our focus these years are the AAA network within the regional center and some of the progress to date. And then my main focus today would be more or less the multi-use paths we can branch away from, but the multi-use paths, which are separated bike or walkways from the main road streets. And then I have a couple active transportation auditing tools that are available, and I wanted to go through those. And then I have some suggestions at the end of what we can talk about and maybe what we want to change from the auditing tools. All right, next slide, Lama. Okay, so who are we? Basically, like I said earlier, we're a branch or a subgroup of the Public Works with HRM. And we're as you can see circled there, active transportation. And there's a number of other groups in there too. And you see, I'm not even in that picture, but there's a number of us that cycle. And what we do is we do these site visits and to these facilities that we have. Next route. This comes from the integrated mobility plan that was approved in 2017. And the main thrust is the complete streets. And what I wanted to say about the complete streets is that the idea behind complete streets within the integrated mobility plan was that the plan, not all streets are the same. That's not what we're trying to say, but all streets can function in different ways. But there's some fundamental, I guess, elements that we want in all of our streets. Not that they're all the same, but they do the best job they can for everybody that's within the municipality, whether they're walking or biking or taking the transit or driving. Next slide. So this is just a screenshot of the types of facilities that this group, that my group, Dave McIsaac is actually the supervisor. And there's about 5 of us active transportation plan, and then there's a grants committee coordinator. So there's a number of facilities that we look after, not so much design, but we design and we try to make, for example, the sidewalks. Well, we don't actually implement these situations, but what we do is we do as kind of our behind the scenes work for example, sidewalks, multi-use pathways, bicycle lanes, protected bicycle lanes, and local street bikeways. And here you have a list of all the number of kilometers that we have at HRM. And underneath the IMP, which is the Integrated Mobility Plan, we have the Active Transportation Policy and Planning and the Active Transportation Priorities Plan. And that actually needs to be updated. But next slide. This is just to give you a list of the things that we take care of. Now, I just wanted to mention that it's a fairly long process for any of these facilities when we implement them. It's not something we just implement. In fact, we do the front end of it, which is hiring the consultants, doing the RFP, and then they do the functional planning, which is 30% design. And they come up with preliminary designs, and then it goes into detailed designs. And what happens there is it goes, during the functional planning piece, we go out to the public and we get feedback from the public when we come up with some concepts, and then we go to council oftentimes. But then the next phase after that is the detailed design, which is that our design engineers take over, and then they do a detailed design of what we've come up with. And then it's construction. So there's a fairly long process in the long scheme of things. The next slide, please, Lama. Yeah, you can just hit this is just to show you that this is not a quick process. There's a number of steps in between. All right, next slide, Lama. I've kind of already covered this, but in the last, let's say, since the integrated mobility plan, we've gone to all ages and abilities, and which means that we're trying to make it so that it's more suitable for all ages and abilities for it. So on the right hand side is the off-street bikeway you see on the right, which is a multi-use path. We have protected bike lanes, and then we have local street bikeways, but it's based on the level of comfort. So the more off-road or separated it is from the streets, the more comfortable people feel. So that's why we would consider that AAA, all ages and abilities. Next slide. And this is just to show you quickly the network in 2017. That was a lot of them are implemented, or they're at various stages. If you look at the bottom right here, these are all the different phases of a facility. And and so the next slide. So in 2023, these are the ones that are planned. So this is all ages and abilities are the routes that are within the regional center. Next slide. And all this stuff is on the website. This is where I'm leaning towards with the group tonight, which is the regional multi-use paths. So there's a number of multi-use paths, and I'm not sure how many people here have used them or use them regularly, but there's quite a list. Some are owned and operated by HRM. A number of them are provincial rails. And then the next slide, you'll see the list of them all. They're all on the website as well. Next slide, Emma. There's some more. And I have a definition of multi-use pathways, and maybe you've read that while you were on the notes. But it is a separated facility, and it's supposed to be for bicycles and pedestrians, but it is separated from the actual street. And this seems to be the facility that is the most popular. Next slide. Once again, these are actually trail groups that have grants that's through HRM that we support. So as you can see, there's quite a number of them. Next slide. So the auditing tools that we've been not struggling with it, but we've been asking ourselves for years now, how do we audit these bicycle facilities for accessibility? And I know there was some work with Lockie a number of years ago. Lucky or Lockie, I forget his name, first name, but he was accessibility advisor, I think, quite a few years ago, maybe, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. Some of you still may know him, but they went out and tried to do some of these accessibility audits for some of the facilities that we were getting in or putting into the municipality, mostly these multi-use paths. And the most recent one that I've used was the Access Now Outdoors app, and I used that last summer, and I'll get in a little more detail with that. That was with Trans-Canada Trails. The next auditing tool was Rick Hansen, and I know I saw Darren Young, he was there too, but his business unit, for example, uses the Rick Hansen criteria for auditing, both indoors and outdoor facilities. I think they are working on the indoor, and correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, but they're working on some parks, or I think they were going to start doing parks in May, auditing some of these parks. And then we have the provincial suggested features that came out a few years ago. Some of you have seen that. And then the provincial guidelines that are coming out this year for auditing these multi-use paths. Next slide. So the one I did last summer, it was interesting. It was basically an app, an Explore Outdoors, Access Now, and some of you may have used it. But essentially, if you look at the right here, you download the app, you download the map or the trail on the map, and then you start tracking. And then what you're doing is you're adding points along this route, and you can also add photos, and then you evaluate whether that feature is accessible, partially accessible, or not accessible. And then you hit done, and then it's all loaded up to the company, and then they put it into a spreadsheet, and then they fix it all up, and then they send the report back to HRM. Next slide. So these are the 3 ratings in the app on the phone. Accessible, like I said, accessible, partially accessible, and not accessible. It's fairly intuitive when you go in, do the app. Next slide. So like I said, we did 3 trails, the Shubie Greenway, Dartmouth Harbourfront, and the Halifax Boardwalk and Barrington Greenway. We use this app. Next slide. So what we did was you look, for example, one of the features was terrain, and you'd go, okay, I'm going to look at this. Now I see that it's it's a dirt path, and you're going to go to the surface section, and then you're going to add in the elements that you think are accessible or not accessible. For example, for surfaces, if it's a rough surface, then you put it in. Next slide. So these are the types of surfaces. There's actually a video before you go out there and do the app. It tells you all the things you can look at before you go out to the field, so that there is some consistency in how people evaluate these. I would say that's we'll talk about it a little later, but that's the sort of the downfall, because not everybody is evaluating these facilities the exact same way. Next one. And another section of this app is the amenities. So let's say there's a bench there, or in this case here, a picnic table. And so you would determine whether or not this is an accessible bench or not an accessible bench. And then you would say yes, no, and then you would take a picture of it. And also what happens is it puts a point on this map that delineates the route that we took or that you're taking. Next slide. So these are just all of the different points. So I like it because it does, when I was using it with a Trans-Canada Trail person, and then we also invited someone from he's a Paralympian, Antone Jacobs-Webb. But what it did help was it kind of force you to really look at different features? So let's look at the access point. Okay, was it accessible? Was there a ramp there, or was there a boulder there that blocked the way, or was there only steps that you could get to it, or was there a steep slope to it? So it kind of forced you to look at things that other people may consider, for example, a hazard or not a hazard. The other beautiful thing, nice thing about it is that you take photos, and then you just ping this on along the route. Next slide. So this is, I don't want to get into too much detail, but this was I think this was the Halifax boardwalk. And this is kind of the review table. So there was a whole list, I think there were 70 something marks that we took, like basically marks where we pinged it on to where we thought a route, and then we would describe it, and then we would decide whether we thought it was accessible or not accessible, partially accessible, sorry. Yeah, and then you had a summary table, and then at the very, if this is all part of the report, and at the end you have like a chart. So in this case here, 79, I can't see my number, I think it said 79% of the marks that we took were accessible, so or that we thought were accessible, and like 15, whatever percentage that is, of partially accessible. We thought that were partially acceptable based on our experience. So it really is based on your own personal experience, what you think is accessible or not accessible. Next slide. And once again, in this report, for example, mark number 5, it was a bench, and we thought it was accessible, and there was plenty of these benches around, and that's it. And we just took a picture of the bench. Another one was on the Barrington Greenway here on the bottom. We took a picture of this. There's a panel there, and then there's an outhouse or a pit toilet, but it wasn't very accessible. If you were, for example, in a wheelchair, it wasn't an accessible. We didn't think it was. Yeah, so that's what it is. It just basically takes all these marks and it takes photos, and then it compiles it all for you. Next slide. The pros and cons of Access Now, the app that we use. It was fairly easy to use. You can also see what other people on the trail commented on. These 3 trails that we went on, I don't think it went live after we did it yet. So I think that's a downside. It's taking quite a long time, because this is all across Canada that Trans-Canada Trail is using. And they're trying to encourage like trail groups and the rest of it to use this app, and for people to share the information that they've collected on these routes. Yeah, the other thing is you have no idea what the limitations of the person using the trail had. So for example, Anton, he was a Paralympian, and I didn't realize it, but that he could bike fast, like really, really fast. And he was, but if we were to walk, that would have been a totally different thing for him. But when we biked these trails, it was very easy, much easier for him to bike these trails than it was to walk. So one of my recommendations is that we should probably walk these trails when we're using the app. And the negative also is that you rely on the company. So for example, I had to wait for quite a few months to get the feedback, because there's a lot of data crunching and photos, and it takes up a lot of their I guess their storage to download. We had a lot of photos that we downloaded. And I guess the report, I guess it was important. I'm not sure. Yeah, what we could do, I'm not sure what we could do with the photos if we were, I mean, not the photos, but look at all the unaccessible, non-accessible features. Even though there was only 17%, we could look at them as a municipality or as a group and start fixing or repairing what that person or that group of people that use the app thought we should work on. Next slide. So this next one, you're probably more familiar with. Darren Young probably presented this. And Darren, please feel free to step in if you want to talk about it. But the Rick Hansen certification. Basically, staff go, or whoever wants to go and get certified through accessibility. It's quite a detailed, fairly lengthy course that you can take through NSCC, and you get certified afterwards, and then you can say that you're certified for Rick Hansen. It's quite detailed. Next slide. Essentially, so far what I've looked at, it's a spreadsheet. It's fairly intuitive and fairly. If you look on the bottom of this Excel spreadsheet, there's signage. There's a tab for washrooms, showers, and bathroom, kitchen. So there's quite a few of it. What I did think was that the trail section, or in our case, the active transportation, I didn't think that there's a lot of, you had to almost look at other sections and then put it together what you thought was important for active transportation. And let me see here. And I think I've heard it somewhere that it's not very detailed when it comes to outdoor, like active transportation routes. So it may have to have some work done to it. Next route. The next slide. Yeah, so here are the Rick Hansen features, and I can't, so it's signage, trail material, whether it's stable or firm, the trail as a minimum of, the width, and the slope doesn't exceed so much. And then there's some things that there's a bench. See, these are amenities. There's picnic tables, a rest area, the urban furniture, equipment, seating table. A lot to do with benches. So if you looked at the list, and I'm sure you have looked at it when I sent it out, it does definitely gives you a guideline, and it can make so if we were to use this system, and I know that Darren Young has used this system for HRM buildings, and also I think he's starting to use it for outdoor facilities. This could be a consistent tool that HRM could use. Next slide. Pros and cons. Looks relatively easy. It's fairly self-explanatory. The other business units within HRM are using it, so that's good. As an active transportation group, we would have to hire a certified person to go out and do these audits for the active transportation routes that we wanted. There are some calculations that have to be made, and like I said, there was limited features for as far as active transportation routes were. And another thing I thought about was the active transportation team's not necessarily responsible for picnic tables, benches, and parking. That's kind of a feature that goes in afterwards. So we wouldn't necessarily look at those items when we're doing. What we do is we do the design. The design engineer goes and designs the route, and then it would be handed over, and someone else could do the benches or the parks. But it's not something that we would have control over. And the other downside was that it's the use of a spreadsheet, so there's no visual. You could probably add pictures to it, of course, but there's no visual. Okay, next slide. So these were some of the provincial interim guidelines, which I kind of liked. It was simple. And then they had to follow these 3 principles on the bottom here. Next slide. So that there's at least one accessible trail entrance, and that it's firm, stable, and slip-resistant material. And then you would evaluate, give it numbers. And I did actually apply this one to I did actually apply both the Rick Hansen and this one to the 3 trails that I used. And in fact, here it even says in the source, it does take Rick Hansen. It does say the source. Some of this information from the province came from, the Rick Hansen group. But it's fairly straightforward. It could be simply applied. Next slide. And then just more information. If the trail is open at night and whether it's well lit. This is one of the last criteria here. And then what basically you just take the maximum score, and then you can compare these to the other active transportation routes. Next slide. Yeah, and then there's a whole section on sidewalks and walkways. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. And then since then, and I don't want to get into detail of this because this is the provincial information, and I'm not sure if it's come to the group yet, the Accessibility Advisory Committee yet. But they're not necessarily going into, for example, the previous slides, the detail of what each municipality is expected to rate or what's important to rate. Now they're doing more of an overall a system where they say, okay, you have to have accessible signage. You have to maintain the accessible trails, and the province will provide grants and funding. So these are the kind of the provincial overall guidelines that they want for let's say multi-use paths. Next slide. And the province will come back, and these are things that the municipality would have to abide by. So this other one is the other ideas, and when I was doing these audits, and I went through a number of municipalities and looked at the audits, and they're relatively similar in that that the surface was firm, there was no higher and no big the percentage of slope it can't exceed a certain number. What I say, the width was like 3 meters, minimum 3 meters. There was no hazards on the trail. For example, the railroad tracks that wasn't make it easier for example, a wheelchair to cross. There was good signage. So there was a number of items that were familiar from one audit to another. I guess what I'm coming to this group primarily for tonight is not necessarily to choose the auditing tool that you like, but to give you a bit of guidance of what is important, what you think is important for the community. I've come across that when I was talking to the provincial directorate, Maddie, I think her name was, she came up with a rating system. When she was in Ontario, she saw these systems at these signs at the very beginning of the trail that, for example, said what the trail width was, the average grade, the maximum grade, trail surface, and if there were any obstacles, I think, and just basically information at the trailhead. So it didn't necessarily say, oh, this is accessible or not accessible. The municipality wasn't making the decision whether it was accessible or not, because there's quite a variety of levels of accessibility. And so I guess that's where the struggle is for auditing these trails. Maybe it's more useful, and I'm just putting that out there, maybe it's more useful to have actually information out there at the beginning at these trailheads, or even on the website, that gives the user the information, and then they can decide whether they want to use it, or whether it's something that's accessible to them. I'm not sure. I think at this point, if I was to look at the active transportation facilities that we design, we have there's certainly elements through their policy. There's certainly elements that say that we have to have a certain level of accessibility. So the slope, maximum slope, or if it's within an urban center, it has to be paved. It has to be 3 meters wide, and these are all in our Red Book design standards and in our Complete Streets guidelines. So that information at the very upfront now that we have is saying we have to follow these general accessibility Complete Street guidelines. So maybe it's not something we need anymore, where we say, okay, we have to go out and audit these trails. Maybe what's more important is that we have the information up front, whether it's on the web page or on the trailhead signage, that gives the information to the user of what we have or what's on this trail. Next slide. Yeah. Sorry, I just realized I added another slide and that was in my the presentation I was going to give tonight, but I don't know if some of you have looked at some of the websites for the trails, for example, the Atlantic View Trail. It's kind of hidden, but there's a whole list of trails that have a list of things like what would you do on that trail, and then it gives basic information like what's the surface type, how wide is it, then they have a map that says where is the parking lot, where are the bus stops, and what are the information they have, basically just information out there for folks to decide whether whether they think it's accessible for them to go use this trail. So I guess my questions here up on the screen is what's your general opinion of the auditing tools that I quickly went through? Do you think they're useful? Like, do you think the app was useful, and were you interested in that? And maybe I can come back with more information about it. Were you interested in more detail about the Rick Hansen audits for trails? And that's something we should maybe look further into because it's already used by HRM. The provincial guidelines, they had some good information there as well. And so basically, what feature do you think are the most important or information to audit for residents in the community for our active transportation routes? And in this case, we multi-use paths, because this is something we've been struggling with for a number of years. It's not so much the sidewalks. It's just more, and it's not even the multi-use paths now, because they have these standards that are built in when we design them or when we go to the public, that they have to meet certain accessibility standards. But maybe it's more useful to have the information to the public. Yeah. So the next question, what would the community want to do with the audited information if we were to follow let's say the Rick Hansen information? What would we do with that information? And or is, like I said, is signage and information shared on the web page, is that more important for the results? Okay, so generally, let's just stick with the first question.
Maria, it's
Unless
Jackie.
somebody has information about the presentation, go ahead.
It's Jackie. I wanted to thank you so very much for the presentation.
Okay.
With the committee here, we usually go through a list in terms of people having questions and comments.
Okay.
It just keeps the flow a little better for all of us.
All right.
So I'll go to the committee members, please, in terms of any comments or questions. Kirsten Hemming hasn't joined us. So if we could start with Rochelle, do you have any comments or questions, please?
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. I think my first question is just for some clarification about your questions. So your presentation sort of like started off talking about multi-use pathways, but it seems like most of what you talked about was about the trails specifically, which I guess are technically a multi-use pathway, but aren't necessarily like as generally used like in the community versus like out for like recreation sort of purposes. So I guess my question is, what exactly are you looking for in terms of like advice? Are you looking for advice on the multi-use pathways within like the city or like suburbs or rural areas, like the community, or are you looking for advice on like the trails?
No, I'm looking for advice on, let's keep it simple. Let's say the multi-use paths. So that could be whether it's within the rural areas or within the urban center or regional center.
Okay, cool. So I guess.
Yeah. So
Sorry, go ahead.
let's just stick to multi-use paths. So
Okay.
what multi-use paths are separated, whether they're paved or not, but they're separated routes that people can walk or bike on or roll or whatever way they want to scooter on to get from one destination to another. And it could be for commuting, but it could also be for recreational purposes.
Okay, so then the presentation about the trails specifically is just like an idea for how the multi-use pathways could be audited more broadly?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
cool.
let's say for example, the Dartmouth waterfront. So there's a waterfront trail that goes from Alderney Landing and it goes to Woodside Ferry Terminal.
Mhm.
Now that trail, that's a multi-use pathway that we have. It's fairly well used. There are some gaps in it. There's sections of it that we're still trying to fix, but that would be the kind of thing. That was one of the trails that I used the audit the app on. So what kind of audit, like what would you think would be important for the community, for our team to audit? What sorts of information do you think is important in an audit?
Okay, I understand. Thank you for that clarification. Let's see, what did I wrote some notes.
And the other thing is we're sorry. The other thing is that we're kind of, I know I'm waffling back and forth. It's because I don't know if, and I'm just being very honest, I'm not sure if an audit of let's say the Dartmouth waterfront is important information. Like, I don't know, because we already have the standards that are in place. Maybe it's more important for us to see, is there a signage at the beginning of the trailhead that gives information about the general, or even a map that gives the general information about, for example, where the slope is, how wide it is, and how far it's paved, for example.
Okay, so I do think that like the use of audits is important, but I find, generally speaking, and this is my own opinion and based on my personal experience, also my professional experience, that a lot of the time audits are done by professionals, often who are able-bodied or neurotypical, and who maybe aren't experiencing like the actual challenges that a lot of us are facing when we try to enter these spaces. And there's also a lot of issues with like maintenance of these spaces. So they may have been audited, it was seen to be like pretty accessible, and then the maintenance just kind of like falls through the cracks and these spaces aren't actually accessible in practice. And so, like, I guess if you are going to use some sort of auditing tool, I think it would be very useful to have like community groups who are doing these audits with you. In general, like, I think that this would be useful information for like any business unit, if I'm being honest. And so that like multiple types of disabilities and multiple types of bodies are represented in these auditing sort of experiences, I think it would give more information. Something else that I tend to use in my own work is, rather than calling something accessible or not accessible, I just offer detailed access notes. So anything that could be any bit related to the accessibility of a space just gets like laid out in plain language for anyone to access, and they can decide if it's accessible for them or not. Because you're right, like something you were saying before is that it's impossible to claim that something is 100% accessible because different people have different access needs. And so something that makes something really accessible to one person is literally going to make it inaccessible to another person. And so rather than trying to claim one or the other of like 100% or not, I would just say like offer as much information as possible from an accessibility perspective in, again, plain language. That's something we talk about a lot on this committee, is that like I don't understand half the language that's being used, especially from like the Rick Hansen stuff. I'm not certified. I probably won't become certified, but that's like pretty specific language for specific professionals to use in their work, and like not necessarily super useful for like the average person to read and be like, I know exactly what this means. Although at a certain point you might learn it because you have to. So that's sort of what I'm thinking there. I think that I'm going to leave it at that for now. And then if we come back around for more comments or questions and whatnot, then maybe I'll have something to add by then. But that's my piece. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. Councillor Purdy, you have any comments or questions, please?
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, thanks, Maria, for that presentation. One thing, actually, just when I was reading it over this afternoon, there's been a change recently for the Shearwater Flyer Trail. So it's no longer being maintained by the Coal Harbour Parks and Trails Association. It's now the Marine Riders Association. So that's just a little change on there. Just basically what has been said already. The one concern about the auditing tool is the it's subject to whoever is doing the audit at the time. So the standard should be very plain to know what it means if you say this, or what it means. Language perhaps should be also laid out so that one thing means the same thing in every trail. And I guess I'm not understanding the tool. So anyone can go on to do their own audit. And then I'm wondering, I think just to kind of tack onto what Rachel said, if that's the case, if people can go on and do their own audits, maybe is there a date stamp for that? Because things can change. And if you're going based on a report of someone giving a good report, and if that was several months ago or even last year, anything could have changed in that time. So I know Wikipedia has like date stamps for when it's been last edited. So something like that would be helpful. And
I was going to say, if you
Yeah.
want to go on Access Now or Outdoors, they have a web page, and the one trail that we do have on there is the oh geez, I think it's I think it's Atlantic View, and they have the trail, and they have the for example, it's marked where there's a bench, or where there's some gravel that's not really firm. So there is but that one, you're right, that's dated. That's already like, I think 4 years old. So that's a really good point to have date stamped. And because it takes so long to have this eventually uploaded, it definitely has to have the date on it. Yeah.
okay, so I was looking online. I'm technologically very not great with anything. So it says that you need a login. So is this something that you have to sign up for in advance to get the information, to have it? Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
But you don't know who is doing the auditing. Like, it could be anybody out in the public.
Okay, so there's no real way to verify
No.
if that's the state right now.
Yeah, essentially. I mean,
Um,
unless we had someone in staff that would scan the information, check it out. But no, it's the intent is for people. It's their own experience. So when they put the information out there, it's their own experience that they're evaluating this trail on. There's a video about how you can do it, but you could have somebody, I guess, that would clean it up on HRM's end if you wanted to, if it was useful.
Right. Okay. No, it's good. I mean, I like the idea of people being able to do that because it's very helpful, and if it's kept up to date, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it for me right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Next, we have Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. It seems to me that there are two things here. On the one hand, we have the Rick Hansen Institute, where you have a number of standards and definitions and procedures, and a set of training. And it is very specific and very well defined, and it eliminates a lot of ambiguity, and it changes things so that they are done to a consistent standard. On the other hand, you have Access Now, where everybody would be able to enter data. Would there be validation of the data? Would there be information defining what the expected criteria would be, or the expected behavior would be? Would there be something that would allow the user to input some of their own abilities, or some, I'm struggling to find the right language, and I apologize for that. But what is their particular level of expertise with particular sets of the data? So we had at one of the playgrounds in the local area, we have a set of wood chips in the bottom of the playground. And we were told that that was accessible. And that was great. So one of the people that I was with was a staff person from HRM. We were told that it would be accessible and suitable for wheelchairs. One of the staff people that I was with, we were able to get a wheelchair. That person sat down in the wheelchair on these wood chips and was not able to move at all. So then refined the criteria a little bit and said it's accessible for a child in a wheelchair because the playground is built around children. We were considering this with an accessible swing, a swing where it has basically two platforms, and you could, a wheelchair user could roll up and sit on the platform on one side, and either a physically able person could sit on the other side, or a second wheelchair user could sit on the other side, and it would be a swing that they would be able to use. But we had to define what the expectation was about what the playground was and everything else. And I'm wondering if any of that exists within the Access Now app, so that you can determine who is using it and what sort of expertise, again, or what sort of capabilities. I'm
No,
stumbling over the language, and I apologize.
Yeah, no, and that's, I think that's definitely a big downside for Access Now. I think it was pretty intuitive and it was really self-guided, but it was pretty evident fairly soon, like pretty quickly when we were out there doing it, that everybody had their kind of their interpretation or their level of how much they were read the night before, the video or something. So it was just it really was based on your own experience. There's nothing. So when you get the information back, you have no idea whether the person, for example, had was a difficulty seeing, for example, that was evaluating the trail, or if somebody was autistic or something. You wouldn't know. It's basically up to anybody who wants to give the information.
So without that qualifying information, without that demographic information being stored, the quality of the information that would be entered into the app would absolutely be suspect. If someone was coming along afterwards and was going to visit the same trail, they could come away with an entirely different impression if they had more expertise or less expertise, or something. But because the criteria isn't recorded, I don't know that it would be able to be trusted as an evaluation tool of a trail. So based on that, based on the lack of the quality of being able to determine the quality of the data and record the quality of the data, I don't know that I would be able to support this. Maria, just to let you know, you are muted.
Okay, yeah, no, that's definitely one of the downfalls. That's there's no way to identify the person or what the criteria was to participate.
So Councillor Purdy had asked if someone was able to log in, or noted that someone would have to log in. Would we be able to go back to that individual and say, what is your experience with, who are you, and all of that stuff, and confirm the information with them?
We could. The only thing is, I guess the objective really for the Access Now was for anybody to go in there. So it wasn't a matter of, you didn't want a certain, you didn't want a certain kind of person. The whole point was that it was open to everybody. So no, you could, sure, you could go back, and you mean, and I don't know how many people would participate, but sure, you could, select few, just are you saying, suggesting maybe we select a few random people that did respond and then just call them and ask them? I don't even know if they could give information, like their personal information.
Right. If they can't, then it would be very difficult to say that we would be able to have any degree of confidence in the app.
Yep.
That's my view. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Russell. Elizabeth, do you have any comments or questions, please?
This is the interpreter. Liz's camera's off, so I'm not sure if she stepped away for a moment or not.
We can certainly come back. Okay, we'll come back to Elizabeth.
Sure, that works.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mahoney.
Hello, thank you. I was wondering like who would be monitoring the, what is it called, Access Now? Like, would anybody be monitoring it and getting like when like who would be, is that your department that would be reading all of the comments?
Yeah, if there was an active transportation route and we wanted to give access to people to go ahead and access it, would be our department that would, but it would first go to the company because it's a private company, and they would go through the data that this, put it in a spreadsheet. Then they would have the photos, and then they would. But my difficulty was that it took quite a lot. Well, the report was good because it came to the municipality and it was up to us to go in there and check on the things that were not accessible. But the information would, of course, would be out in the public. I don't think it is up in the public yet, but that information would be up in the public, and then people could, use it at their own, whatever information they needed it for.
Okay. Like Rochelle said, some people are not, don't have the Rick Hansen. I do have the Rick Hansen, and I've learned so much about parks and trails. Well, it was an online course, so we kind of just touched on it, but I did learn, so much about trails and parks, and my concern that the app would just be a dumping ground, really, and if people just use it as a complaint, I don't know, because what's accessible for me might not be accessible for somebody else. And like, I just stayed at a hotel in Yarmouth, and I have a physical disability. I was looking for an accessible hotel, and I will celebrate the True Hilton, or the Hilton True by Hilton, I guess it's called, because they were very accommodating, and they had a walk-in shower. I was able to use this hotel room and to completely independently get myself ready and out the door. And the only reason why I'm telling you the story is because I wrote them, because it's great. It's great to acknowledge when people get it right, or when businesses get it right. And so I want them to know that, that their service, like, they didn't even go above and beyond, but but the fact that they had something available for me was, the icing on the cake, really. And, because a couple of weeks earlier, I was at a hotel in Toronto and I asked for an accessibility room, and yep, sure enough, I got an accessible room. Everything in the room was accessible, except I had a bathtub shower. And to me, that their definition of accessibility and my definition of accessibility were quite different. Because when everybody else that was at the conference that I was at had a walk-in shower, but I requested an accessible room. I got an accessible room, low handled everything, but I had a bathtub as a shower. And, my husband travels with me because I can't, I need assistance where I'm at. So he helped me in and out of a bathtub, but I thought it was very funny that everybody else had a walk-in shower, and that's all I wanted was a walk-in shower. And, so I think we really need to be careful on, and I just tell you those stories just because it's ironic, right? So now when I ask for a hotel room, I'm asking, does it have a walk-in shower? Because that's really what I need. So, back to this and, again, it's what's accessible for everyone, right? I just worry that the app would, I don't know. I just, if somebody says something on the app and you respond to it, is it gonna be overwhelming for you? And, are you going to be hiring people like myself that has the Ricanson to do these audits? And yeah, anyway. Does that sound okay? I'm not trying to.
No, I think it sounds great. So you're impressed with the Ricanson audit for trails then, for active transportation routes?
Yeah. I didn't read, just the whole thing about, having a bench every so often. I forget the numbers off the top of my head. Sorry, Darren, if you're listening. If you don't use this stuff every day, you don't remember it. So, anyway, yeah. So I just, and it's all about the surface, the walking surface or the wheeling surface, and just slopes and hills and all of those things you really need to take into consideration. And yeah, anyway.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Michelle. Next we have Nicole, and we'll certainly come back to Elizabeth.
I don't have any questions or many comments. A great presentation. But yeah, it depends on who's using the app. Like someone who was able-bodied and then got into, let's say, some kind of accident, they would be they're more able-bodied than someone, let's say, like me, that was born with a disability. So I think maybe, like, I don't know, for example, the cobblestone example, like I just look at that picture and it's not, like, I can tell you right now that's not accessible. But somebody who's was able-bodied and now has a wheelchair, they probably could get, be strong enough to go over like cobblestone easier than I would. Or like Michelle's example about the hotel room, like she says that it's accessible, but in my opinion, no hotel rooms are completely accessible because they all have carpets and wheelchairs. I'm a wheelchair user, and carpets, they don't work well, like they don't go together. So And so like, and people need, like, people with different disabilities need different things, like some people need walk-in showers, some people need bathtubs, so I guess it depends who's using the app.
Thank you.
No problem,
Okay, Nicole, you've made your comments. Thank you.
no problem.
We could now please go back to Elizabeth.
Yeah, so what I read was, really interesting. I don't really have too much to say, but I'm just thinking more about older people and their experience. They might not feel comfortable. For example, as Nicole was saying with the cobblestone, that's another demographic of people who might struggle with that, for example. Yeah, I was also thinking about the Lawrencetown Beach specifically, and that is tough to traverse on. I think the signage is definitely important. So you could see, for example, you could have different signs throughout the trail to have more information at different points. I thought that would be a great idea. I haven't used the app myself, but I think, it is a great idea. And yeah, see what happens.
Thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth. Thank you. I'm going to, just for one moment, step out of the chair because I do have a comment as well. I think it's very important that there's consistency kept with the provincial government in terms of the legislation, the regulations, and the standards that are being developed. For any municipality to use an individual tool, I think is giving too many different messages to the citizens of the province. From a provincial end and from a legislation perspective, they're looking at consistency across the province. I think that's just something important to keep in mind. I'll step back in the chair position now. Do we have any other comments or questions before we finish up on this end? Okay, hearing none.
Sorry, it's Rochelle.
Yes, Rochelle.
I was wondering if I
Sorry.
could just, I did remember one more suggestion I had just in terms of like auditing stuff, because I don't know if it's included already. If that's okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
One thing I noticed just in the small like Excel sheet that you shared, that when it came to like seating and benches, there was no like weight or height related information there, which I don't know if the Rick Hansen certification or like the Rick Hansen things are like have that included, but I do think that would be important information to have just generally. And that is my last thing. Thank you.
I think.
This is Liz. Do you mind if I add something related to Rochelle's point here?
Please do, Elizabeth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm definitely happy you brought that up because I was also thinking about like handrails related to benches, like being able to, lift yourself up. Because recently I noticed a couple of days ago, there was an older man who sat down on the bench and he was really struggling because there weren't hand rails or, the guardrails on the side of the bench. So he could like lift his body weight out of the bench. So that's another thing that I was thinking about as well. Maybe you could add that option.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay. Maria, sorry. Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah. Just to pick up on Liz's and Rochelle's point about the benches, I always say, like, wouldn't it be great if we had a variety of height of benches? Because I can't get up from a seated position without assistance. So, I always say we should have a few different heights of benches along parkways and trails and things like that. So I just wanted to add that wouldn't that be an innovative feature? It would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, Maria, I want to take the opportunity to thank you so very much for your time and your efforts here. I hope the committee has given you some food for thought. And again, thank you very much for your time and the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, on to the next item. Committee members. Do we have anything from any of the committee members? No, hearing none. All right, on to the next. Staff updates. We have none according to the agenda. Correct?
This is Liz. Sorry, 1 second, just. Yeah, just related to lighting. Sorry, just the interpreter. Yeah, so just related to what we were talking about before, for parks and other areas, I was just thinking also the accessibility related to lighting for deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Or even someone who might struggle to use a phone themselves, like that might be another group of people that might struggle with using that technology. So that's, yeah, I wanted to throw that out there as well.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. All right, do we have, Lama, any items added?
Sorry, can I just, I know we're off this topic, but since Liz kind of brought us back onto it again, so can I take away from our discussion that essentially folks question the whole app because there's no criteria for whoever uses it, and that we kind of would like that the Rick Hansen app is it's favorable, it's used by other groups within the municipality, and so we should pursue that. Now, what about or is it more I guess I never really came away with it. Do people think that the information on trailheads signage and or on the web page, like for example the surface type or the slope or the width of the trail, if that's important information to have on these trailhead signage? Is it something that you think is important for the team to pursue or to use as a almost like a, not a matrix, but like a goal or a standard that we should start to have on all of our multi-use paths, is to have these signage that kind of give for each of our paths, but on the website, of course, but also at the trailhead itself?
Maria, I'm going to speak on behalf of the committee. I'm pretty sure none of us come here with the idea today that we had to make a decision on one thing or the other. I would suggest that the comments made by all the members need to be taken into consideration. I think, as well as you, I've heard that Rick Hansen standard would be something that the committee would certainly be favorable for. However, if it was specific kinds of things that you need some feedback on, we can certainly do that. I'm not sure people are prepared today from that perspective, other than the comments that they've made.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lama, do we have any added items at all?
No, Vice Chair, there are no added items.
Okay. The date of our next meeting is May 15th at 4. Having no more business, I'll call for a motion to adjourn today's meeting. Do I have a mover, please?
I'll do it. Oh,
Who first? I think Rachel was first.
Doesn't
No?
matter to me.
Pardon me?
Doesn't
Cool.
matter to me.
Okay.
it was Nicole.